In the middle of these trade talks that resumed today in Washington with a top Chinese delegation and the U.S. delegation, and of course, when they all arrive officially tomorrow to begin them, then you have to wonder, what is the outside effect of these indictments against the Huawei CFO, who's the daughter of the founder, no less, and how that complicates things. Already the Chinese are not pleased with what they're seeing. Will that have anything to do with what they are ultimately offering? To Stanford School of Business lecturer Dave Dodson. What do you look for, Professor, right now from these talks?
It is going to be a big deal. There's no question about it. The Treasury Secretary said that it's not going to complicate the trade negotiations, but that's sort of absurd. And if you need any evidence of that, look at how the indictment was announced. We had the acting Attorney General standing there. Next to him was the Director of the FBI. Next to him was the Director of Homeland Security. And if that wasn't enough, we brought the Commerce Secretary and the Treasury Secretary to announce an indictment. In what world do you bring the Commerce Secretary to announce an indictment? So we were signaling that this is going to be a big deal with these trade negotiations. But even if you say, I don't buy any of that, China's perception of this is really what matters. As you said in the lead up, it isn't as if we had arrested an executive of a company in China. We arrested the daughter of the founder of one of the most venerated companies in China. This is like Bill Gates' daughter being arrested. So China is outraged by it. And then this is the real Tom Clancy part that's really intriguing, is that there's an allegation that Huawei and the Chinese National Intelligence Services are integrated together. And that's pretty frightening given what the company does. If that's true, and we don't know if it's true, but if that's true, you can be certain that she knows about that, and she may be in U.S. custody. So make no mistake, when those trade negotiators got on the plane to come to Washington, D.C., one of the things they were told is bring her back.
What if they don't bring her back? What if we don't let them bring her back? Then what?
Well, it gets pretty intriguing because we've got a couple of other parties here. First of all, she's not in U.S. custody yet. She's with the Canadian government. Right. And so Canada right now sort of holds the cards. And China is putting a lot of pressure on Canada. And to give you a sense of the seriousness of this, there's a Canadian citizen who was sentenced to 15 years in prison for drug charges. He was brought out in a one-day trial and resentenced to the death penalty. So the Chinese government is holding a Canadian citizen for the death penalty right now. They're serious about getting her back.
You know, I'm just wondering, I know we're dealing on two separate tracks here, but these tracks are going to collide, right? I mean, I don't see how they can. And I don't see if we are elevating this to the degree we have. And you're right to point out that, you know, with the Commerce Secretary there and everybody else, at first I thought they wanted Wilbur Ross there for the charisma aspect, but leaving that aside, that obviously it was a full press, right, to do this. And it's got to complicate these trade talks. And I could see the Chinese holding back in the middle of this.
Well, or it could be a card that we have. President Trump said to Reuters not so long ago that he would intervene if it would help the trade talks. So, look, there's a number of reasons why we
could clarify that for me. Some tell me that he can't intervene in this. It's a legal matter, or can he?
I'm not a lawyer, but the way I understand it is the indictment is handed down by the Justice Department, and the Justice Department reports up effectively to the president. And if you buy into the unity theory of the executive branch, he could in fact do that because the prosecutor has discretion on who he would prosecute and who he wouldn't. But, Neil, it sort of begs the question of why are we doing this? Now, of course, we could be doing this just because we're getting tough on crime, and that's certainly what we're presenting to the public. It could also be, as maybe you were indicating, that it's part of the trade deal. But there's also another piece that's quite intriguing, which is we have to remember what Huawei does. They basically sell the heart and lungs of the telecommunications system. And we are rolling out throughout the world the 5G network. Now, why that's significant is 5G basically takes the intelligence and moves it not out to just your cell phone and your laptop, but to your refrigerator. And if, in fact, the company, Huawei, and the Chinese intelligence services are integrated, we're basically seeing a world where China has moved their intelligence out into all of our devices. And that's frightening. And that raises the question about maybe what's going on here is we're trying to stop that rollout.
So that we maintain an edge in whatever happens with 5G.
Not just an edge. There's the commercial aspect of it, but there's really the intelligence aspect of it. The United States has already said you're not allowed to put your equipment in the United States. Their markets are Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. But Europe is already now taking a pause and saying, well, maybe we're not going to have them roll out their equipment into Europe. And that, by the way, would delay the 5G rollout in Europe by about 2 years. It's a big deal. And the company has a history of not only selling things to Iran, they sold some HP equipment to Iran, but they have a history history of espionage or alleged espionage. And that's something that we need to take seriously. If you look at what happened at Marriott, we've sort of forgotten it. But not too long ago, 500 million customers, their data was hacked in Marriott, of which 350-something million passport numbers were hacked. So this sort of ability to get into our networks is a frightening thing from a U.S. security standpoint. I think this is more about U.S. security than it is about commerce.
That's interesting. I didn't think of that. Professor, thank you very much. Why did I have professors like you when I was in school? Explaining things very clearly that even a thick skull like mine could comprehend. Thank you very, very much.
I don't think it's so thick.
Well, you got to see it to believe it. Dave Dodson, Stanford School of Business. Interesting read on that, right? That this might have many more layers to it than we know.